Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom today from the holy city of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, as we come to some very wonderful studies in the prophet Zechariah and in the writings of Rabbi Nachman. So today, let us begin with the very remarkable prophecy that is in Zechariah chapters 3 to 4. Shalom, today, the 21st day of the month of Sivan of the year 5778, corresponding to the 4th of June of the year 2018. And we come today to study two chapters in Zechariah that are all part of the same extended prophecy. And part of this prophecy is well familiar to people who attend the synagogue and know that we come to this prophecy each year at the time of the portion of Bahalotecha that we read just this last Shabbat, and also when it comes to Hanukkah, since this prophecy shows the inside of the temple and the temple menorah. Well, the Haftarah that is read on Parashat Balotcha and on the Shabbos of Chanukah begins already at chapter 2, verse 14, with the great joy of Jerusalem, the time of the redemption, that led to the rebuilding of the temple, the second temple, and behind all of this is the prophetic vision of the end of days when God will redeem Zion and Jerusalem. And we had the remarkable words in chapter 2 verse 14, not only that the Lord will dwell in Zion, but in verse 15, V'nilvu goyim rabim el Hashem b'yom hahu, that many nations will be joined to Hashem on that day. V'hayu li la'am, there shall be for me as a people. That is to say, this is a tremendous prophecy that people from many nations will be joining and become the people of the Lord in the time to come. And that is the introduction to the following section in chapter 3, verse 1, which continues with a series of prophecies, all of which were said in the 4th year of King Darius of Persia, as we read at the introduction to this set of prophecies. That is at the beginning of at the beginning of chapter 2, and that was the series of parshiot, the series of parshiot that moves rapidly between visions of different aspects. We had the horseman, we had the measuring rod of the future of Jerusalem, and we had the promise of the restoration of the temple. And now we come to the temple, and this is a prophecy which apparently has particularly contemporary reference for the generation of the prophet Zechariah, because it specifically refers to Yehoshua, Kohen Gadol, the high priest Joshua, who is mentioned in the book of Ezra. It was Yehoshua, the high priest, who came from the priestly line of Aaron and was to be the high priest in the second temple. Yehoshua is described in the book of Ezra as having come up with Zerubbabel, who also plays a very important part in the ensuing prophecy. At the time of the beginning of the reign of King Cyrus of Persia, who became the ruler of the Persian Median Empire after the death of his father-in-law, Darius the Mede, who died just 1 year after overthrowing Babylon. And at the beginning of the reign of Cyrus, as we've mentioned many times, came the first green light for the return of Judeans from Babylon to Jerusalem, and some of them came, and they there laid the foundation of the second temple. But as we know from Ezra and Nehemiah, there were serious enemy forces around from the surrounding nations who prevented this work from proceeding by sending letters to the court of Cyrus implying that Jerusalem was going to rebel against the Persian Empire. And as we know, the work on the temple was stalled for those 18 years until the second year of Darius. And now Zechariah's prophecy is of the fourth year of Darius. And in the course of this section of prophecies, now we come to the figure of Yehoshua Kohen Gadol in this very important and interesting section. A new parasha stuma beginning at verse 1 of chapter 3, after the promise of God's return to Jerusalem. Verse 1 of chapter 3, Vayar'eni Es Yehoshua HaKohen HaGadol Oimed Lifnei Malach Adonai V'yasoton Oimed Al Yamino Lesiteno. The prophet sees the vision of Yehoshua, the high priest, the great priest, great above all his brothers, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord. And there is a Satan, an accuser, that is standing at his right hand to accuse him. And before we even hear what the accusation is about, already we have a verse that is recited by many prior to going to sleep at night, at the time of the Kriyat Shema al Hamitah, the saying of the Shema last thing before closing one's eyes to go to sleep. Verse 2, Vayomer Adonai el hasoton Yig'al Adonai becho hasoton Vayig'al Adonai becho הבוחר בירושלים, הלא זה ודמותו מאש. But the Lord rebukes the Satan. We are familiar with the figure of the Satan from the book of Job at the beginning, where it's Satan that goes to accuse Job, and now the same accusing figure, God rebukes this figure of accusation against Yehoshua the high priest. God Almighty himself is against this accuser. God, the word for rebuke is repeated twice in the verse, because the Satan is being rebuked while God is choosing Jerusalem. And this, that is to say, this man, Yehoshua, the high priest, he is a ud mutzal mi'esh, that is a log that has been in the furnace but has been pulled out to be saved. Although it is scorched, nevertheless it is essentially saved from the fire. Let us go on a little before coming back to Forshim on these very interesting verses. Verse 3, V'Yehoshua hoyo Lavush begodim tzohim v'hoimei lifnei hamaloch. Surprisingly, Yehoshua the high priest is actually clothed in filthy garments, a very shocking state for the high priest to be seen in this vision, when the garments of the high priest should be, as described in the book of Leviticus, in all their splendor, with gold and scarlet, blue, purple, and all of the precious jewels. But here he is with solid clothes, and yet the voice comes forth, verse 4, Vayan vayomer el ha'omedim lefono v'leimor hosiru habagodim atzohim meholo vayomer elo rehei ha'avarti meolecho avoinecho v'halebei joisecho machalotzois. But the Malach, who is present in this procedure, in this heavenly court, The Malach answers, already giving the verdict against the accusation of the Satan. He says to those standing before, those attendants standing there, remove the filthy garments from upon him. And now, speaking to Yehoshua, the high priest, the angel addressed him directly in the vision of Zechariah. I have removed from you your sin. I have clothed you in precious robes. And continuing with the adornment and the clothing of the high priest, in verse 5, V'hoima yosimu tzonif tohor al rosho, v'yosimu hatzonif hatohor al rosho, v'yalbishu begodim, u'malach Adonai oimeid. According to our commentators, it is here not the angel, but actually the prophet. So as Rashi says, Ani Zechariah, I, Zechariah, that say these words, let them put the pure crown on his head. And they indeed did put the crown, this is the special turban wound around the head of the high priest that's described in Book of Exodus in the parasha of Tetzaveh, describing the priestly garments, the crown together that would be with the tzitz, that is the plate with the name of the Lord written, inscribed in gold that was upon his forehead. All this is now replaced upon the head of the high priest, thereby completing the 8 garments of the priestly robes. And there the angel of the Lord stands, continuing as it were to protect the high priest, but now to reprove him. Well, let us go back before we hear the reproof of the angel to what our commentators have to tell us about this figure of Yehoshua, the high priest, and what was the significance of these sullied garments. Well, we do indeed find in the book of Ezra, where it speaks about the genealogy of those who came up with Ezra from Babylon, and establishing the genealogy was a major preoccupation of Ezra, given that they had been in exile in Babylon for 70 years, and there were many cases of intermarriage, and particularly for the priesthood, the purity of the pedigree is an absolute imperative, and that is why Ezra was so involved in this particular issue of purifying genealogy, particularly of the priests. And this is a theme in the prophecy of Malachi, where there is reference to Malachi indeed is considered by some to have been a pen name for Ezra. There is Malachi does address the issue of the purity on the moral plane of the priests. And here this vision of the high priest, as Rashi tells us on his comment on the opening verse of chapter 1, what is this accusation all about, on account of the fact that the very sons of Yehoshua, who were from the priestly line of Aaron, had themselves married non-Israelite women, that is to say, nochriot, whether that actually means they were pagans or they were some kind of shallow convert. In any event, according to the laws of the priesthood, any woman who is either a convert and certainly a non-Israelite woman is forbidden to the seed of Aaron. And this we have referenced in the book of Ezra, chapter 1, verse 18, where the verse says there that it was found among the children of the Kohanim, those who had brought to dwell with them pagan women from among the children of Yoshea, the son of Yotzadak. That is the same as Yehoshua, the high priest, mentioned in our verse here. There are different versions of his name in different places of Tanakh. In Ezra, he's called Hoshea. Here, he's called Yehoshua. And the name Yehoshua with the added Yud testifies to an added level of holiness, which is in the figure of the high priest. And of course, the high priest is the center of the temple. All of the buildings and the courtyards of the temple, all the rituals carried out by the priests were all under the, as it were, presidency of the high priest. The Kohen Gadol, who had authority over all of his brother priests, was responsible for their purity, for their atonement in his sacrifices brought on the Day of Atonement, and with his own unique associated priestly garments. There was no other case of any priest in the service in the temple who would wear garments similar to those of the high priest. All of the other priests in their service in the temple would wear only 4 garments: their trousers, their overshirt, their belt, and their turban hat. Only the high priest had the 8 garments. So the sullying of the garments of the high priest here is indicative of this flaw, where the very dirt on the garments is indicative of this flaw in the family, because of course the children are garments for the soul of the father, who is indeed a garment for the soul of his ancestors. And here we see the prophet joining in this great purification. All this is going on at the same time as the events in Ezra, the later part of the book of Ezra, where he specifically describes the process of the purification of these families and the sending away of the pagan women. So here we have at the beginning of the era of the Second Temple, this purification of the priests. And although we do see references in the other prophets to the concept that even non-priests in the future Third Temple will be admitted to the service of the temple, nevertheless the priesthood will be a hereditary inheritance of the family of the descendants of Yehoshua, the high priest. They will be from the line of Tzadok, who came from the line of Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, the high priest. There was the second line of Itamar, Aaron's first 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu, died childless, as we find in book of Leviticus. And so the other 2 sons, Elazar and Itamar, there were times when the high priest was from the line of Itamar. And indeed, this was the case at the time of Eli, the high priest, who was from the line of Itamar. But we see that the line of Eli was cursed, as we see at the beginning of Samuel, 1 Samuel, the very first chapters, chapter 2, and the whole rejection of the descendants of Eli from the priesthood. And here, nevertheless, we see the restoration of Yehoshua, who's from the line of Tzadok, the priest, who later ministered in the time of King David and King Solomon, and from whom we see in book of Ezekiel that the future priesthood will derive. So the purification of Yehoshua, the high priest, is very important. Let's also bear in mind that in the time of the Second Temple, the great miracle which we commemorate until today of Hanukkah came under the auspices of the high priests, and the restoration of the priests is integral to the restoration of the future temple. Well, now, for more detail about this description of Yehoshua the high priest as being a brand plucked from the fire, as if he had been in the fire and had been saved from the fire. This we need to amplify with a reference to the Talmudic narrative in the Talmud in Sanhedrin that speaks about what was happening in Babylon. We know that burning people in the fire was a favorite pastime of the Babylonian rulers from the time of Nimrod, who tried to burn Abraham in the furnace, and he was saved. And then we see from Book of Daniel the attempted burning of the three companions of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, in the furnace, and they are saved from the furnace. Well, now, the Talmud in Sanhedrin narrates about two Israelite false prophets who were in Babylon, who are alluded to in the prophetic text in Ezekiel, and who actually had a plot, the two of them, to conspire to get the hand of Nebuchadnezzar's daughter. And each one of them came along to her and said that he had had a prophecy that his companion will receive her hand in marriage. Well, the princess was so confused that she went to her father, and he really already suspected something. He smelled a rat, so he said, well, let's test them and see if they will survive being burned in the fire. And according to the Talmud there in Sanhedrin, those two false prophets, together with Yehoshua the high priest, who had this stain of guilt from him that had to be scorched off on account of his children having married pagan women, and his not protesting against this, he was also sent in there with the two false prophets into the furnace. And of course they were killed, but Yehoshua the high priest was scorched but saved. So there's a whole lengthy Agadah there in Sanhedrin, Daf Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph, a dialogue between Nebuchadnezzar asking Yehoshua, how come you were saved but you were scorched? And the conclusion of the Talmud over there is because he was saved because he himself was righteous, while those two prophets were fake, but he could not be saved in the way that Daniel's companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were saved, nor like Abraham was saved because he didn't have sufficient merits on account of his daughters, of his sons being married to pagan women. And so, with that, let us come now to the continuation of the prophecy here in Zechariah chapter 3, moving on now to the reproof to Yehoshua the high priest, verse 7. Koyomar Adonai Tzvaos, im bederochai teilech, v'im es mishmarti si shemo, v'gam ato todin es beisi, v'gam tishmor es chatzeroi, v'nosati lecho malachim, beino oimdim ho'ele. So says the Lord of hosts, if you will go in my ways and you will guard my charge, you too will rule over my house, and you shall guard my courtyards, and I shall give you movement among those standing here. Well, here, this verse is subject to a very interesting translation in the Targum. If we will turn now on verse 7 to Targum Yonatan, we see that he translates as follows. So says the Lord of hosts, if you will go in rightful ways before me, and if you will guard my charge, and you shall rule over those who minister in my holy temple, and you shall guard my courtyards. And the concluding words where the Hebrew says you will have movement and ability to walk among those standing here, over Achayus Messiah, the time of the resurrection of the dead. Achayinoch, I will give you life. Ve'etein loch raglin mahalchon beis sarfayo ho'ilein. I will give you legs to go among these seraphim, these fiery angels. The concept of the ability of the high priest to walk raglin, legs, among the seraphim. Let's go back to the Hebrew verse. The Hebrew verse says, "Ben ha'oimdim ha'eleb," among those who stand here. Those who stand here, this is a reference to the heavenly court, where the angels are considered to be fixed. The angels do not have free will. They cannot move about except in fulfilling the mission of the word of the Lord. But the free neshama, soul of Yehoshua, is promised, according to the words of the Targum, resurrection, a very, very interesting prophecy with many possible interpretations. And continuing in verse 8, Shemano Yehoshua HaKohen HaGodol Ato ורעך היושבים לפונך, כי אנשי מויפס הימו, כי הנני מביא את עבדי צמח. Here, please, Yehoshua, the high priest, you and your companions who sit before you. These are the prophets and sages of the men of assembly that came with Yehoshua, the high priest, back to Jerusalem, and now at the time of Zechariah, who is already at the time of the imminent arrival of Ezra for carrying through the new temple to a new level. You are men of wonder. These are those same prophets that were with Daniel in Daniel's visions at the latter chapters of Daniel. You are men of wonders, this gifted generation. For I am bringing my servant Tzemach. Tzemach here is the word Tzemach means something that sprouts forth. It's a metaphor of a plant that is constantly renewing itself. And the word tzemach, which is also the same gematria as the word Menachem, which is the name of Moshiach, is an allusion to Melech Mashiach on two levels. It's an allusion to Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel, who was the governor of Judea under the Persian emperor and was the leader and the branch of the house of David. So this alludes simultaneously to Zerubbabel and to the future Moshiach. And that is explicitly stated in the commentary on our passage now by Mitzudat David on verse 8. Where Mitzudat David tells us, you and your friends, says Mitzudat David, you and your friends, you hear, and let your friends also hear. These are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the companions of Daniel, for they too are men of wonders. They were saved from the furnace of fire, just like you, and it would be only fitting to let the word of God in this prophecy be joined to them also. Here I am, says the prophet, I'm bringing, that is to say, the word to them is, prophecy is, that I am bringing my servant Tzemach, Zehu Melech HaMoshiach. That is the King Messiah, as it's written in Jeremiah chapter 23, V'hakimoisi leDavid Tzemach Tzadik. I will establish for David an offshoot that is righteous. And now, in going back to the Hebrew text, in verse 9, we come to this vision of the stone, and we shall discuss shortly what exactly is this stone, this Even. Verse 9, Ki hinei ho'even asher nosati lifnei Yehoshua Al even achas shiv'o einoyim. Hineni mefateach pitucho. Neom Adonai tzvois. Umashti es avoin horetzahi b'yoim echod. For here is the stone that I have set before Yehoshua. The Hebrew phrase that follows, Al even achas shiv'o einoim, upon one stone, 7 eyes. Well, this looks terribly mysterious, and of course it is. But on this stone, Hineni mefateach pitucho, here I am engraving, it's engraved mark and message, says the Lord of Hosts. And with that and through that, umashti es avoin ha'oretz ahi, I will sweep away the sin, the guilt of that land in one day. And just to go to verse 10 before going back over the commentaries on verse 9, Bayoim aho hu ne'um Adonai tzvahos, tikra'u ish l'rei'eho, El tachas kefen v'al tachas te'eno. On that day, says the Lord of Hosts, you shall call each one his friend, his companion, under his vine, under his fig tree, this vision of peace, of social intercourse among people under the vine, with the fruits of the vine and the shade of the fig tree. Well, what is this stone, the prophecy of which comes in immediately after the prophecy about Tzemach, the issue of King David? Well, on one level, the Evan, the stone, is taken by our commentators to refer to the foundation of the temple, which had been there from the days of Cyrus of Persia, with the first green light to start building, where the work had been interrupted. And on that was therefore the foundation stone of the temple that had not yet been built up. That is the explanation of Rashi on this verse, the foundation stone that was set there in the days of Cyrus. And the people of that time, as we see from the prophecy of Haggai and from the book of Ezra, when they saw the small size of the second temple in relation to the glory that some remembered from King Solomon's temple, that was considered very small and demeaning, and combined with the opposition of those foreign peoples around them to the building, they were totally discouraged. So here, according to this simple pshat, the simple explanation of the concept of the stone with its 7 eyes, according to Rashi, we may understand the idea of the 7 eyes, the Einoyim, by understanding the Hebrew word ayin, which of course does on one level mean the eye, as in the human eye, E-Y-E. The word ayin is also in many places used to describe the appearance of something, and it's a very obvious relationship between the vision of the eye and the appearance of something, as we find, for example, in Ezekiel chapter 1, describing the appearance of some of the elements of his vision, where the word ayin is used. So, according to this explanation that the stone is the foundation stone of the temple, the prophet is promising that the stone will grow 7-fold. There will be, in its appearance in the future, will be 7 times the size and the magnitude of the one size now. We see throughout Mikra, throughout the Tanakh, that the idea of multiplicity is in the concept of 7s, the 7 years of the Shemitah count, the 7 years of the the 7 cycles are leading up to the Jubilee, and of course the 7 days of the week leading up to the Shabbat, and many other 7-day cycles. And the concept of 7 is one of multiplicity that is included in unity. And this indeed will be the theme of our next chapter, the vision of the menorah. And so we're not supposed that specifically, according to this explanation, we're talking about the second temple being 7 times the size of the first temple. But certainly in later times, and this is alluded to in the prophecy, the second temple has become very much glorified, as happened in the time of King Herod, who greatly enhanced and beautified the original structure of the second temple. Well, now, another allusion of the stone, as we shall see, it is Zerubbabel who's really the architect of the future temple, of the second temple, and the stone is also an allusion to the stone used by the builder on his plumb line, which he lets down in order to ensure that the wall that is being built is absolutely perfectly perpendicular. And so that is another allusion here to the greatness of Zerubbabel that will be revealed. Now, Rashi, in his explanation on verse 9, on the words that are here translated as the engravings on the stone, picks up on the allusion of mefateach as being opening up something. That is to say that it was necessary to open up and release the building of this second temple, which had been held up by the enemies, as we read in Ezra, all of these years, and now this will be opened up. And this is also the way that the verse is taken by Ibn Ezra and the other commentators. And here we see the enormous power of the temple to atone for sin. Through the continuation of the work of the temple, there will be an atonement for the sins of the people, and this will lead to this future prosperity and blessing, as we already prophesied in the prophecy of Haggai about the prosperity that would come with the continuation of the building of the second temple. So now we continue with what is a new level of this prophecy. Here is the vision of the temple candelabrum. And this is a new stage in the prophecy, even though it's all part of one parasha. There is actually no logic to the division of chapters here at the end of the biblical printing of verse 10, chapter 3, and breaking a new chapter into chapter 4, verse 1. It's all part of one parasha, a continuing and expanding prophecy. And indeed, the figure of the Kohen Gadol and the figure of the menorah intimately bound up. It is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who lights the holy candelabrum, which itself is a symbol of the unity of all of the branches of creation, all of the 17 nations, all of the 7 branches of humanity that join together under the 7 Noahide laws, which are all the fundamental rules of the Torah. So now we are going to see this vision of the temple menorah, which is described in detail in Exodus in the portion of Terumah. The actual form and shape of the menorah, which is well familiar to us from, for example, the Arch of Titus in Rome, which apparently records the appearance of the Second Temple menorah. There's one major division of opinion among our sages and teachers of whether the branches of the menorah were straight or curved. Everybody agrees that the main trunk of the menorah was perpendicular, but the difference of opinion is whether the branches went out straight at angles from the side, or whether they curved upwards, as we find in, for example, the present-day emblem of the State of Israel and most representations of the menorah. For the purposes of understanding this vision, this is actually, division of opinion is not relevant, because what is of interest to the prophet is not the shape of the branches, but actually where the oil that is nourishing and nurturing the menorah is coming from. And that again is a huge remez, a huge hint to the Hanukkah miracle where the oil came miraculously. So with that, let us go into this prophecy on beginning at chapter 4, verse 1. Vayoshov hamaloch al dover bi, vayireini kehish asher yeor mishnosai. So the angel that was talking with Zechariah, now the prophet describes how he comes back again. There is in all prophecy and all connection with the divine necessary ups and downs. There are moments of running forward out to the level of prophecy and then returning back, just like the angels in Ezekiel's prophecy, Ratzor Vashuv, running forward and returning back. And the prophet had to have an intermission, as it were, between the sections of the prophet in order to go into a re-energizing slumber. So now the angel comes back to wake him from his sleep, to come to another level of prophecy. Vayomer Eli, verse 2, Vayomer Eli mu'ato royeh, Vahoimar rohisi, Vehine menoras, Zohov kolo, Vegulo al roisho, Veshiveho neiroiseo oleho, Shiveho veshiveho mutzokois, La neirois asher al roisho. Well, here now, in this prophecy, it's the angel who challenges Zechariah, as we find in Jeremiah chapter 1. What do you see over here? He says to me, what do you see? V'oimar, the kri here, the way we read this word is I said, Zechariah said, but what is written in the text is, in the written manuscript, is Vayomer in the third person. What the prophet sees is the vision of the menorah, Zahav Kula. This is unmistakably the temple candelabrum. V'gulo al roisho. Unlike the description of the candelabrum in Exodus, in the parasha of Terumah, here there is a bowl on the head of the menorah. V'shivo neiroiseho oleho. There are 7 nerot. These are the lamps that are upon the menorah. The menorah is the familiar candlestick with its 7 branches, and there are its 7 branches upon it. Another element that is not visible in the vision of the temple candelabrum in Exodus, Terumah, here, Shiv'o v'Shiv'o mutzakos. Here there are 7 mutzakot, pipes. Laneros. These are pipes coming to the lights. Asher al rosho, that are on the head of the candelabrum that is supporting these 7 lamps. So here there are 7 times 7 pipes. And according to our commentators, each of the actual lamps of the menorah, which is a cup with oil, is receiving through 7 pipes that are all coming from this gula, the bowl that is feeding the oil flowing down the pipes into each of the lights. In other words, the prophet is seeing here not only the physical temple candelabrum, but he's seeing the celestial menorah with vital clues about the sources of the spiritual light of the menorah, which shone from the temple. So here the menorah is one of the central elements in the temple where the light of the Torah, the Noahide laws, and the Torah shines out of the temple. And now verse 3. ושניים זיסים עולהו, אחד מימין עגולו, ואחד על שמאלו. There are two miraculous olive trees upon this, one to the right of the bowl, one to the left. Well, here we are, replete with Kabbalistic allusions. The 7 times 7 pipes alludes to how each of the 7 sfirot is sending its influence in all directions to all of the other sfirot. And so the influence of all of the sfirot together is 7 times 7, as we have in the Omer count 49, and in many other allusions. Well, now the prophet, seeing these visions, he asks, verse 4, V'an v'oimar el hamaloch hadoi ve'bile mo'ele adoini. Prophet asked the angel, well, what are these? And now the beautiful part of this prophecy, Vayan hamaloch hadoi ve'bi vayomer elai haloi yodato mohei mo'ele vo'imar lo adoini. The angel answers, do you not know what these things are? And Zechariah answers, obviously he does not. Verse 6. Vayan vayomer elai lemor Zeh devar Adonai el Zerubbabel lemor Lo hei v'chayil v'lo hei v'choyach Ki beruchi Omar Adonai Tzavos. And the angel answers, saying, this is the word of the Lord. This is the message to, now named explicitly, Zerubbabel. It's not through a show of force or of human strength that you will build this temple. It is only through the Spirit of the Lord. And that is what is being expressed in the prophecy of the pipes coming from above, from these miraculous olive trees that are feeding the menorah. We come now to verse 7, which is the conclusion of the Haftarah, the prophetic reading on the portion of Ba'alotecha that we had last week on Shabbos Chanukah. But we shall go on today with the continuation of the later part of the prophecy, all of which still concerns the menorah and the temple and Zerubbabel. But in verse 7, the concluding words of the Haftarah, Mi'ato ha'gadol lifnei Zerubbabel lemishor v'hoitzi es oheven horoisho teshuhois Chene lo. Who are you, this great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will be turned into a plain, level ground. This is an allusion to the enemies of the Jews who were seeking to build the temple there in Jerusalem, as described in Ezra and Nehemiah. And they may have seemed like a mighty mountain to the returning exiles from Babylon to Judea, faced with this antagonism that reached to the Persian court. But here, even the highest mountain in face of Zerubbabel will be turned into a straight plain where he will advance. V'hoitzi es even horoisho, he will bring forth the stone that is at the head, and this would be again an allusion to the successful building of the temple. And to shuois chen lo, Cries of Chain, beauty, beauty. Chain is that same attribute that is attributed to Esther the queen, the early contemporary of these events. Let us take a look at Rashi's comment on these words. Rashi in his commentary on Zechariah chapter 4 verse 7. Miator Hagadol, who are you, this great mountain? These are a reference to the Sarei Eva Hanahor, Tasnai Pachas Eva Nahar Roshar, Bosnai Kavanosain. These reference to those names are quoted in Ezra. The officers of the Persian Empire to the west of the Euphrates, their whole gang who had succeeded in stopping the work of the temple until now, they will be in front of Zerubbabel like a straight plane. They will have no further rulership and greatness over him. And V'hoitzi es Evan al Risho, says Rashi, he takes out the stone for the head. Ha'adrichal, the architect, the designer, Yikach es Evan abedil biyodoi. He will take the stone of lead in his hand. Liyos adrichal b'roish habonim. He will be the architect and the planner, the designer, the head of all of the builders. V'heim yifnu akol lefi dvorov. They shall build it all according to his words. Asher tzaveh b'vinyan nur mefuar. Everything he will instruct for a beautiful and glorious building. And the Teshos Chen, these cries of Chen, beauty, grace, beauty, glory. Yulo le'oiso even shakol yomru manoe binyan zeh ho'asuya lidei even amishkoris azois. Cries of beauty and charm will be to this stone, that all will say how beautiful is this structure that is made through this plumb line, the stone of the weights, the plumb line of the building. Teshuas Chain, explains Rashi, like cries of beauty, and he quotes a number of other verses going back to our Hebrew text in this parasha now on... we now turn to verse 8, which comes after where the Haftarah of Parashas Baalei Zichron Shabbos Chanukah concludes. I'd like to go forward to learn this entire prophecy in its completeness until the end of chapter 4, because it goes on with further elaboration of the vision of the menorah. This comes in a further prophecy, verse 8, Vahidavar Hashem Elai Lemo, the Lord comes to Zechariah again. Yedei Zerubbabel, Yisedu Abayis Hazeh, V'yodov Tevatzeno, V'yodato, Ki Adonai Tzvoit Shlochan Yelechem. It is the hands of Zerubbabel that will establish this house, as it was taking form in front of their eyes there. And now the prophet addresses those who found the early days of the Second Temple disappointing compared to the glories of the First Temple. Verse 10, Ki mi hivaz loyoim katanois v'samachu v'rahu eso even abedil beyad Zerubbabel shivo eile einei Adonai heima meshoitetim b'chol haaretz. Anyone who was disparaging on the day of smallness, when they saw only the very small structure of the new foundation of the temple whose work had been installed, they shall rejoice when they will see this stone of lead in the hand of Zerubbabel, the building stone, this glorious design. Shivo eile eini Hashem, these seven are the eyes of the Lord. Hema meshoitetim b'chol haaretz, they are ranging over the whole earth. Again, according to the Pshat of Rashi here, this is referring to the sevenfold glory of the second temple in relation to the earlier temple, and Targum Yonatan refers it to the actual rows of stones. But let us, of course, remember with the eyes of God ranging over the whole earth that the temple is considered to have its whole power emanating from the foundation stone, which is at the center of the Holy of Holies, the reputed place of the formation of Adam and the sacrificial place of Noah and Abraham and the binding of Isaac, and the place where Jacob had his dream of the ladder, and which Jacob set as the foundation stone of the temple. And the temple is considered to be the source of all of the hashgacha, the providence of God over the land of Israel and over the whole world. And one of the illusions of the sevenfold nature of the eyes of the Lord is that the eyes Kabbalistically are considered to consist of 7 different membranes and various different colors and sections of the eye, alluding to the eyes of the Lord, which through his emissaries wander through the whole world. Well, now in verse 11, it's when the prophet begins to ask about the source of the oil of the menorah. And this is where the prophecy is particularly significant. It's the not the form of the menorah so much as the source of the oil. Says the prophet, verse 11, Vo'amar elov ma shenei hazeisim o'ele al yamin ha'menorah ve'al smoilo. I answered and I said to the angel, what are these 2 olive trees, one on the right, one on the left of the menorah? And he goes further into further detail about the vision he sees. Verse 12, V'an shenis v'amar elo ma shetehi sheba'alei hazeisim asher bayad shenei tzanterois hazohov hamerikim yaleihem hazohov. Prophet further elaborates his question a second time. He says to the angel, what are these 2 shibalei hazeisim? Shibolet is a cluster of, for example, wheat kernels on a stalk. And here the cluster of olives are the clusters at the top of the tree. These particulars we learn in the Talmud in Tractate Menachot that speaks about the production of the oil of the menorah. The most favored oil was the sun-ripened olives at the top of the tree that were squeezed out for the first drop that would come out on squeezing, not ground and crushed, but simply squeezed pure for the temple candelabrum. And these clusters of olives are in Shnei Tsanterois, 2 golden Tsanteros. A Tsanter is translated by our commentators not necessarily as tubes but as containers. The oil is coming from the 2 olive trees through pipes that are going into the system of 7 times 7 pipes that are feeding the 7 lights of the candelabrum. And now, in the final answer to his question, where's all this coming from? By Yomer Elai Lemor, Halo Yodato Mo'ile, The angel challenges him, don't you know as yet? You have not yet reached this level of knowledge. This is above you. You need to internalize this. And now the angel teaches him, verse 14, Eile shenei v'nei hayitzhor, ha'oimedim ala doin kol ha'oretz. These are the 2 children of the Yitzhar. The word Yitzhar is in Hebrew, as we have in our second paragraph of the Shema, Yitzhorecho, your shining oil. The root Sohar is light, illumination. The light comes from the burning oil. And here are the 2 Bnei HaYitzhor. The olive tree is also called the Yitzhar, and they're standing over the Lord of all the earth. Well, Rashi explains here that the reference is to the 2 Yetzers, as alluded to in the word Yitzhar, the 2 Yetzers, the inclinations in the heart of a person that are the heart is the Lord over all the earth, and the two inclinations, the good and the not good inclination, these are those that rule man, and we need to understand to draw down the shefa, the blessing. We need to overcome the evil inclination and to give sway to the good inclination. But Sudat David gives a different interpretation of this section of the prophecy, that these two sources of illumination refer to the two key figures in the in the second temple, and these are the king and the high priest. And with that, we conclude this very remarkable prophecy of Zechariah, which is going to go on with new sections and level of the prophecy, touching on the moral source of law for the whole world that has to come forth from the temple. So with that, my friends, we conclude our studies of Tanakh, a rather lengthy study we had today, the purpose of which was to be able to cover this entire prophecy in one session, and very shortly after a brief interval, we will come to our studies in Likutei Moharan. Shalom, my dear friends. Let's continue now with our studies. And given that we had an exceptionally long session today on the prophet Zechariah on account of the importance of seeing the entire vision of the Yehoshua the high priest and the temple Candelabrum and Zerubbabel all as one. Therefore, we're left with relatively short time to look at Likutei Moharan, and I'm therefore hesitant to go into the actual text of the section which is next in our order of studies, because it's a very subtle and intricate section. And what I would like to do is to explain from, as it were, from outside of the text, what I am receiving from Rabbi Nachman in this section Tet, the 9th section of this 4th Torah Discourse of Likutei Moharan, Volume 1, where Rabbi Nachman, in this whole lengthy section, takes off from his early discussion about the confession before the Torah sage as being integral to the soul of the Israelite coming to the sage, to the tzaddik, to receive his direction in life. The vidui, the confession, is not a one-time event, but it's a repeated process. And although it appears that Rabbi Nachman did not continue for very long with the practice of receiving vidui, confessions, from his followers, nevertheless, this section explaining the process of continuing vidui before the Torah scholar is very important for our understanding of the key spiritual pathway of Rabbi Nachman, which is hitbodedut, solitary prayer. Because really, hitbodedut prayer is what we pursue in the absence, most of us, of having such a tzaddik and a sage to address our confessions to. And here, as in a number of other places in Likutei Moharan, we see Rabbi Nachman lay down for us the very essence of the spiritual path, which is one of constant aliyah and yirida, constant ascent and descent. We have rises, ascents, and then we have falls. And indeed, as Rabbi Nachman explains elsewhere, the fall, the backtracking, the retreat is in fact an integral part of the journey forwards. It's only through the decline, through the descent, that we're able to muster the spiritual energy to pull forward, to pull ourselves out of it. And so all of spiritual advance follows the paradigm that is expressed in Ezekiel's prophecy, chapter 1, where the angels are described as being in a constant state of ratzo vashov. Just like flashes of lightning, where the lightning flashes from one side to the other, going back and forth. The angels are described as ratzo, running, and shov, returning. And so it is with the soul. The soul runs forward out of constraint, out of restriction, to expansion, to devotion, to attachment to the higher, to the infinite God, but then must necessarily come back into the vessel, which is the clay body, the material body. And Rabbi Nachman explains that through the continuing process of vidui, the soul of the Israelite is exposing himself and herself to the fire of the Torah, and as it were, dissolving himself or herself into the fire of the Torah through the interactive encounter with the Torah in this process of vidui, where the person is bringing the Torah into their heart and the person is beginning to refine their character part by part. As we've seen, this whole discussion is in the context of a stage-by-stage coming closer by the soul of the Israelite to the Torah, as personified in the figure of the tzaddik. And stage by stage, as Rabbi Nachman states in this section, the person must refine and elevate his or her traits and qualities, behavior, and this is reflected in other parts of Likutei Moharan, where Rabbi Nachman also explains this is the process of hitbodedut, the steady self-refinement. And it comes in this state of ratzo vashov. And for Rabbi Nachman, the highest state of devotion to God is that of devout prayer. And devout prayer meaning particularly the recital of the prayers as laid down by the men of the Great Assembly through their prophetic spirit, embodied in particularly our Amidah, Shmona Esrei prayer, where the person becomes a vessel for these words coming forth as prophecy through their soul out from their mouth into the world. And Rabbi Nachman describes in the section that we shall be studying in greater depth in our next session, describes how at times a person in their prayers will actually come forth with a torrent of the words, the prayers, which flow forth seemingly without any effort. They flow forth with fire and fervor. And this is the stage of ratzor, of running out, where a person runs beyond their boundaries. And in this section, Rabbi Nachman cites the example of Moses in his devotion as being paradigmatic, where Moses did not know that the rays of light came shining from him. Moses was completely self-effaced, and indeed the infinite light shines when a person is beyond knowledge. This is a theme that occurs in many teachings of Rabbi Nachman, particularly in teaching 65, the Garden of the Souls, where Rabbi Nachman describes how a person transcends their finite boundaries in attachment to the infinite, where the person goes beyond da'at, beyond knowledge. And this is integral to the process Rabbi Nachman is describing in this whole teaching, where he opened up the very beginning of the teaching with the words that when a person knows that everything that happens to them is only for good, that is the equivalent, that is a taste of the world to come. He says the only way to do this is by elevating the malchut to its source. And when he introduced the subject of vidui, he speaks about the concept of the musical note, the zarko, which was thrown upwards. The confession is thrown upwards, outwards to the Lord. And this is the teshuvah, where we are throwing out the malchut, throwing out the words back to God. And when we attain this level of fervor in prayer, we go beyond da'at, beyond conscious knowledge, to the infinite beyond. But we cannot remain there. As long as God wants us to stay alive in the world, our souls have to come back into our bodies. We have to come back down to earth, to the material world. And this is the key to understanding the whole process of this teaching here, because when our souls return from that state of bitul, of self-effacement in the infinite, in moments of ecstatic, fervent prayer, when our souls return, we return with the trace of the light that was apprehended at the time of the bitul, at the time of the self-effacement, when the spirit flowed through. When we return to regular consciousness, we come enriched with that trace, with that residue, and that is now accessible to our conscious mind, our conscious da'at. And it's precisely through that vision of the unity of God at the time of self-effacement, at the time of bitul, when it's drawn back into da'at, into our conscious knowledge, that we are able to connect the two sides of da'at, which is the side of chesed, kindness, and gevurah, discipline, where God's blessing, God's favor, and God's strict and severe and restraining left hand are seen to be a unity. So it's through that unity that we then bring into the conscious mind, that we're able to understand that everything is for our good. So the section we should be studying is may profitably be read in conjunction with the teaching in Likutei Moharan 65, Volume 1, 65, The Garden of the Souls, which is available in print from the Breslov Research Institute in full translation by myself and commentary. And in the parallel session in that teaching, for those who are familiar with it, the very beautiful teaching of the gardener who watches over the Garden of the Souls, there we see again a presentation of the same idea of how through fervent and devout prayer we rise up beyond the apparent duality of the world of good and evil to the world of absolute unity. So let that serve, God willing, as an introduction to the session we should be studying inside in the text of Likutei Moharan in our coming session. And with that, my dear friends, let us conclude today's studies from Jerusalem. I would like to wish you Yom Tov Morach, a good and blessed day. And with the help of God, I'll be back on Thursday for continuation of our studies in Zechariah and in Likutei Moharan. In the coming week, I will not be in my office and I will not be here, so our studies will unfortunately have to be suspended for next week, but we'll resume, God willing, the coming week, and full details of when they're will not be classes, and when there will be classes will be sent out in the coming schedule and diary. But please do take note that there will be a class this week on Thursday, but that next week there will not be classes either on Sunday, Monday, or Thursday, but they will be due the following week. With that, my dear friends, I wish you shalom from the holy city of Jerusalem.